What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more iOS 18.2 beta features. We're going to talk about Apple's big plans for Siri, fresh leaked documents showing which iPhones law enforcement can break into, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and check out the Apple Den newsletter. Okay, so let's start by talking about even more new iOS 18.2 features and changes. So this week we saw the release of Beta 4, aka Public Beta 3, and this is very likely going to be the final beta before the RC, and then of course the final release. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But let's talk about some additional new features here in Beta 4 specifically. So the first one is actually inside of the Photos application, and now if you go into a video and you scrub on the video, you can see that we now have milliseconds that show up. So before you would just see the seconds, now it shows the little milliseconds right there afterwards. Also in the fitness application, if you go into the awards section right here, and then you go down, it seems like we have a new award for all rings closed. So where it says 100 all rings closed, for example, that appears to be a new, award that showed up here in Watch. And then of course, one of the big changes in iOS 18.2 Beta 4 is the fact that we now have more circular images to the left of a sender, a profile picture, if you will. So you'll notice that for Morning Brew and the Rundown AI, that little picture there is circular. It's smaller and it's also more rounded off than it was beforehand. Now, what I don't like about this is that it doesn't match up with when you get an email from an individual. So when you get an email from an individual, it is fully circular. And you can see how the Apple one right there, you can see the difference between these two. I wish that everything had the same shape so it was more cohesive when it goes down. So maybe Apple will change that next. They'll change either the profile picture for individuals, or they'll make the business ones a little bit more round, like a full circle. So we'll have to wait and see, but I still like it. I think the Mail application got its biggest upgrade ever here with 18.2, and I love it. Also in 18.2 Beta 4, I noticed that ChatGPT answers are now being vocalized fully. So what I mean by this is when you ask ChatGPT something via Siri, before in previous betas, at least for me, it would not tell me, it would not verbally read out the entire answer from ChatGPT, but now with Beta 4, it does. So this had nothing to do with my settings. My settings were, to give me a vocal response every time, but now even if it's a long, text like this, Siri will actually read out the ChatGPT response, which is great. Also, the visual intelligence feature for the iPhone 16 series has gotten better here with 18.2 Beta 4. So this feature allows you to point your camera at a location and get quick access to call them, see the menu, see the hours, all of that just by pointing your camera at it. And it was kind of buggy in Beta 3. It didn't really work as well as I would have liked. And that has been improved here with Beta 4. I did have to go out and try this again. And I noticed that the locations pop up more accurately now. And when you're pointing it directly at it instead of away from it like it did before. So visual intelligence just got a little bit better here with Beta 4. And I would expect that to continue to improve throughout iOS 18 as a whole. And we'll talk about the performance and the battery life on 18.2 Beta 4 in a moment. But first, let's talk about some updates related to applications and just some other news from this week. And the first one has to do with the Uber application. So Uber not only got a new home screen widget, which is actually very handy, and this allows you to quickly tap on your address to get an Uber ride. So instead of going into the application and then tapping and, doing however many, button presses you'd have to do, now you could just do it with one tap from the widget, which is really convenient. Now also, Uber introduced Uber XXL, which allows you to access a larger trunk space vehicle when you have luggage. And they also announced Uber X Share at airports, which allows you to share your trip with one other airport traveler and save up to 25% on your fare. And if you're somebody who has the Recognize Music toggle inside of your control center, you helped contribute to Shazam's 100 billionth recognized song. Yes, Shazam just this week hit 100 billion song recognitions, which is amazing. And they said that a person would need to identify a song every second for 3,168 years to reach 100 billion. That's how many people are using Shazam. And of course, Apple does own Shazam. If you're not aware, that is what the recognized music here is, run by, is Shazam. And also this week, we saw Apple announce that you're going to need to be on iOS 9 or later to perform perform an iCloud backup. So Apple is not going to allow iOS 8 and previous devices to even make an iCloud backup. And also, Apple will be deleting existing pre-iOS 9 iCloud backups. So if you need to restore any of your data from an old device, you might want to go back and do that before Apple just completely eliminates the iCloud backups. I'm not sure why they would do that. I mean, I do understand it from their point of view, but that's going to suck if somebody finds an old device and they can't restore their old data. Anyways, back to iOS 18.2. So I want to talk about the performance here because I've noticed that after using 18.2 beta 4, it has been noticeably better for me in terms of performance. So I didn't really have major issues with beta 3, but beta 4 just feels smoother overall. I hate saying that because it's so broad, it doesn't really tell you everything, but I can just feel the difference here with beta 4. And that's also evident by the Geekbench score. So I did run a fresh set of Geekbench. I did a fresh Geekbench test here, and look at those scores. So 3532 on single core, 8718 on multi-core. If we go back and throughout my history, that I believe is the second highest score we've ever gotten on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And that includes stable releases, not just betas. So very strong score there. And of course, a lot stronger than our initial run that we did when the device was still processing and, optimizing everything on the back end. So performance for me has been great. And yes, we still have some issues with the stickers with all these blank spots right here, but at least my stickers are still here, unlike we saw with beta 3, as you guys saw in my video. So stickers, not fully resolved, but it's getting better. And then in terms of the battery life, I have to say that battery life has also improved here with beta 4. And I did not expect this. I thought it was possible, but I did not expect it. And as you can see now, I've been running this video for about 14 minutes, and you can see that my battery percentage has remained at 80% the entire time. So that is with me screen recording and going throughout my device. I can just tell just from that alone that battery life is a little bit better here in beta 4. So that is also great to see. So that's great. And hopefully the RC and the final release will build upon that and, increase battery life even more. But keep in mind, we are on an A build here. So I don't really think that a lot is going to change in terms of performance or battery life, which again, that's not a bad thing because it's really good here on beta 4. Anyways, let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is going to be the week of Thanksgiving. And this is going to be where we see if Apple breaks a trend or not. So Apple typically never releases software, beta or not, on the week of Thanksgiving. So next week is the week of November 25th. And there is a slim possibility of seeing the RC build of iOS 18.2. And the only reason I say that is because Mark Gurman did say that 18.2, the final release, is coming on December 2nd. And in order for that to happen, we would need to see an RC on the week of the 25th, unless Apple is just planning on releasing 18.2 to the public without even pushing out an RC build, which is extremely rare. So is there a possibility where Mark Gurman is wrong about the release date for iOS 18.2? Absolutely. Nobody really knows except for Apple themselves. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We could see the RC build on the week of December 2nd if we don't see anything next week. And if that is the case, we should see the final release of iOS 18.2 on December 9th. But of course, Apple is unpredictable, especially around all these holidays and everything. So it's really hard to say. If you want to be notified immediately when this software comes out, when the RC comes out, then be sure to join the Apple Den Discord. We do have alerts that go out for that. And of course, you can also follow me on X. I will post about it on there. And of course, I will always have a video here on the channel a couple of hours later. And then after that, we will see iOS 18.3 beta 1 begin to roll out after 18.2. That should be at some point in December as well, but beta 2 is probably not going to come until January. Now, also this week, we did see Apple release iOS 18.1.1 along with all the other corresponding updates like macOS 15.1.1 and so on. And I did make a video on these updates, and everything I said in that What's New video still stands today. So the only thing that was changed in those updates are going to be those security patches. And I've also had some people ask me if those 18.1.1 security patches are also going to be added into 18.2. And the answer to that is yes. We don't know if they're specifically in beta 4, but they will be added into the final release, of course, of 18.2. So nothing to worry about there. And of course, 18.2 will have several other bug fixes as well when it comes to security vulnerabilities. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And you guys know how we've talked about Siri 2.0 before in the past and how that's coming in iOS 18. Well, if Siri 2.0 was a real thing, the Siri 3.0 is going to be coming in iOS 19, and now we have some fresh details on what that might include. So this news comes from Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg, and he says that the revamped Siri that is dubbed LLM Siri will leverage new Apple AI models to interact more like a human would. And these new in-house models will also allow Siri to perform more complex tasks, which Apple currently has to rely on ChatGPT for in iOS 18.2. And he also says that app intents will be improved to allow for more precise control of third-party applications. And Apple is currently testing this new Siri in a separate application, but it will eventually replace the current version of Siri. And when is this LLM Siri coming, you might ask? Well, Gurman says that they're expected to announce it next year as part of the upcoming iOS 19 and macOS 16 software updates, aka we're probably going to see it announced at some point in June. But as we just saw with Apple Intelligence and iOS 18, those software features are not going to be available when the iPhone 17 comes out. So this Siri 3.0, this LLM Siri, is not going to be on the iPhone 17 when it releases, because this software, just like iOS 18, is expected to release in the 0.4 update, which is Apple's big spring updates. So we're going to see that in spring of 2026 is what it looks like. Now keep in mind, nothing is being delayed here. The new Siri features that are coming with iOS 18 that Apple announced at the Worldwide Developers Conference, all those features are still coming in iOS 18. Nothing is being delayed. This is just details on the next version of Siri, the next iteration of Apple Intelligence and those new models. Now, are Apple's LLMs going to be able to compete with ChatGPT by the time that comes out? Probably not. I mean, let's be real. But the big win for Apple here with doing something like this and having their Siri LLMs be more like ChatGPT and more human-like is that the responses are not only going to be quicker, but the biggest win for Apple is going to be that they won't need to rely on a third-party service anymore. This will all be first-party. So just imagine your ChatGPT responses you get now, that's going to be accomplished using Apple's own LLMs with LLM Siri. So that's going to be a big win, and it's yet to be seen if ChatGPT is still going to be integrated at that point. And I'm sure it will, because ChatGPT is just going to continue getting better over time. So we'll have to wait and see. This is still pretty far out, but this is very interesting news that we just saw this week. Now, also this week, we saw a very rare leak of some documents from GrayKey, which is a phone unlocking and forensics tool that is used by law enforcement to get into your device and access your iPhone's data. They usually rely on security vulnerabilities to get in there. So this week we saw some leaked documents which were very interesting that showed that GrayKey is only able to retrieve partial data from all modern iPhones that run iOS 18 and newer. And take a look at this chart. I mean, it shows that GrayKey is not able to obtain all the data from, all these modern phones. Like the iPhone 11 models can seemingly be fully unlocked, but after that, they are pretty much locked down. And what's interesting is that there's no data yet included in their documents on 18.1. And I wonder if that's because of Apple's new tactic of rebooting the phone if it hasn't been unlocked in a certain period of time. And they did also throw in some Android phones as well, so you can see how Apple iPhones compare to these Android phones when it comes to, basically having law enforcement allowed to get in and access the data. And 404 Media, who got the scoop on these leaked documents, made sure to let us know how rare it is for these documents to leak. But it's really interesting to get an inside look at, this type of data. And it really makes you appreciate Apple a lot more when it comes to locking down their devices and making them as secure as possible. Now, also this week, we saw a decade-old rumor get reignited, and that is the potential launch of an Apple television set, a TV set. Yes, like a TV you have in your living room. Apple might be making that. It's probably not going to happen, but it's a possibility, according to Mark Gurman, because he said that Apple is currently evaluating the idea of making an Apple-branded TV set as part of its smart home push. And as we heard last week, Apple is planning to launch a smart home command center as early as March, and that's going to be able to control all your HomeKit devices in your home. And if you combine that with the other smart home products that Apple has or has planned planned, it kind of makes sense now more than it ever has in the past. And plus, with Apple's constant, innovation and their constant improvement in terms of display tech, and also the ability to make products so small and so skinny, I can see Apple making, the Apple TV, the set box that we have right now, the Apple TV currently, making that as small as possible and being able to fit that within a really thin frame in an Apple television set and just completely removing the Apple TV. I don't think they'd actually get rid of the Apple TV, but they could make that into a television set. And I think that would be awesome. Now, do I think this is actually going to happen? Probably not in the next 5 years, but maybe in the next 10 years, we'll see an Apple TV in our living rooms. That would be awesome. And then also this week, we got confirmation that the iPhone SE 4 is coming in spring of next year. So just a few months, we should be seeing the iPhone SE 4. And this news comes from Barclays analyst Tom O'Malley, who recently released a research note. So this note was written after he traveled to Asia to meet with manufacturers and suppliers, and he detailed his key takeaways from that trip. And one of those details was that they quote unquote confirmed that the 4th generation iPhone SE with an Apple designed 5G modem is expected to launch towards the end of the first quarter next year. Now, we don't have any new information about what's going to be included with the iPhone SE 4. I feel like we've covered all those leaks over the past few months or past year plus at this point. So we don't have any new details, but it does look like it's getting, more likely to be released early next year, which is great. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a couple was flying on United Airlines from LA to Barcelona for a 2-month trip. And since they clearly watch my videos, they put an AirTag inside all 4 of their checked bags before they took off. So when they landed in Barcelona, Dan, one of the guys, checked the Find My application and was relieved to see that all 4 bags had arrived. But at baggage claim, only 3 showed up. The missing bag's AirTag showed that it was just feet away, seemingly just right behind a wall. So Dan reported it to a baggage agent and showed them the AirTag's precise location in the Find My app, but he was told, quote, "We don't go by AirTags, we go by our system." And United said they'd deliver the baggage to them. So they ended up leaving the airport after that promise, but hours later, Dan noticed that the bag was moving away from Barcelona, 34 minutes outside of the city. So he suspected it had been stolen, possibly by an airport worker, and knew he'd never see it again. So of course he did file a claim for this missing baggage, and he did also contact United and basically told them he had years of loyalty with them. But despite that, the airline refused to act on the AirTag's data, and now that bag is gone forever. It was never able to be located after that. So what perfect timing this is, because the big feature in iOS 18.2 that I've talked about for a while now is the new Find My feature, where airlines are going to have access to the Find My map in your data as long as you send them a link. So I think that incidents exactly like this one will be a thing of the past, or at least be a lot less likely to happen when Apple implements this in 18.2. So it's a shame for Dan and them who lost that bag, but it's good to see that we have a potential solution coming for something like that in the very near future with 18.2. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's Apple Weekly episode. And of course, 18.2, that big video when that gets released, will be out in just a couple of weeks. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.